So I'm William Rubel. Some of you know me. I am an autodidact. So I'm somebody who did not graduate from college. And I have various passions, many of them food related. I write about bread. I think most of you know that. And some of you attend my Thursday bread history seminars. I write about early modern kitchen gardens. I also have been working for 30 years, as Andrew said in the introduction, on the smoked, cured, and fermented milk of the Samburu tribe. I'm going to begin with a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm sort of going to wander through some pictures, kind of like travelogue. But the focus of my work with the Samburu, which is a Maasai tribe. They speak Northern Ma. Ma is the language that the Maasai speak. They intermarry with the Maasai. They dress similarly, similar customs, and also deal with the milk in similar ways. All of the pastoralists from Kenya have one form or another of fermented milk. And this includes the Kikuyu, who is the tribe that was found around Nairobi, which, by the way, means cold in Ma, in the language of the Samburu. Even the Kikuyu, who are, long been ages now since they've been pastoralists, but they also have smoked milk. But it's up in the northern part of Kenya with the Samburu, the Rindile, the Pokot, the Turkana, that the tradition has remained strong up until now. The staple food of the Samburu when I first went there was milk. And the way I got into this is I did something unusual for me, as I read up on the people I was visiting. I had gone to Kenya the first time with my friend David Aurora. Some of you may know him. Are you still getting feedback? Someone said hard to listen. Pam Pierce. Is everyone hearing me?
I hear you fine.
I hear you fine. I'm not certain what Pam might be.
And I hear you fine.
Okay. So I am friends with David Aurora, who wrote the great book, Mushrooms Demystified, and the small little book, All the Rain Promises and More, which, if some of you have that book, my picture faces the title page. It's one of my big claims to fame. And he was going to Kenya. He was going to Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, in April of 1991. And he makes a living from books. He said, William, come in April, we'll go for 6 months. I says, David, you know perfectly well, I can't do that. I have a job. But I could come for a few weeks in August. So we looked at a guidebook. This is 1991. There were no cell phones. And in A Lonely Planet guide, we saw that there was a hotel called the New Arusha Hotel in Arusha, Tanzania, and they had a bar. So he left for Africa in April, and without any contact between then and August 15th at 6 p.m., I went to Nairobi, flew to Nairobi. I got into the DHL van. And it's hard to believe, but in 1991, there was so little mail going to Arusha that DHL had just a regular Toyota van to hold the mail and tourists. So I met him there, and we traveled around a bit. And one of the traveling around a bit took us to Wamba, Kenya. And you can look that up on the Wikipedia. It's a small town in the Samburu lowlands. And we were immediately surrounded by kids. It was then unusual for any white people to be there. It still is, actually. In the last 20 years, I've only seen maybe 2 white people. But at that time, you'd get surrounded by kids. We thought they were 9, 10 years old. They turned out really to be teenagers. And one of them, we talked about mushrooms, and I really liked it there. It felt like the Wild West. Wamba at that time was a one-street town, big dirt street, and on either side, like in Western movies, these one-story buildings with a covered walkway. And there were men with the Home Guard World War I style bolt-action rifles. And then there were the warriors who were just dressed up, all fancy with spears and with spears. So, you know, like, what's there not to like be attractive? And the weather was nice. So anyway, one of the boys wrote to me and said, could I help him with school fees? And I thought, well, that would be kind of clever, because people were asking $20, $20 US to take a photograph. This was not a friendly place to take pictures of people. And I thought, well, if I paid money for school, then they would have to bring me into the family, you know. And that proved correct. It proved to be correct. So I returned the next year in 1992, and I did a little bit of research. I went to the UCSC library, and I read something that an anthropologist wrote, and they said that the staple food of the Samburu was milk. Okay, that's fine. So I get there, and you know, I'm on the top of this bus that is welded to a truck body. It took 5, 6, 7 hours. I don't remember exactly on that trip to go 50 kilometers. So you're literally going 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers an hour, and then breaking down. And we finally get into this town, and everybody comes out. It's like, well, I guess like in a Western movie. And as we come up the street, they pull on the air horn, da 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 da. It was so much fun. It's sort of uphill, and then we stop, and you're surrounded with the villagers. So Lawrence Letois, who I'd given money to for school, he meets me there, and we walk to his mother's house, which you will see was a stick and dung hut. It's nighttime by that time. We're walking. It was a full moon. You learn that you don't need electricity if you have a moon. And we go inside this hut. There's no windows. There is a door that's very narrow. You go in sideways. There's not very much wood there. So I am a giant of 5 feet 5 inches. I cannot stand up in it. So you come in sideways, and you stoop and sit down. And in the dark, there's always a fire going, so it's very smoky. In the dark, a cup of milk was passed around. And I tasted this milk, and it set off this 30-year quest. Because this anthropologist was an idiot, and a complete idiot. Because to call their staple food milk would be the same as saying that the staple alcoholic drink of the French is grape juice. This had nothing to do with milk as we know it. And what you find in the literature really is an incredible, implacable amount really of racism, cultural ethnocentricity on our part, condescension towards the other, and a complete failure to engage in the foodways of the people that you're studying. Most anthropologists studying the Samburu are interested in the warriors and in the hierarchical system that favors men and people with penises. And they don't talk to the women. The women anthropologists now are interested in feminist issues, but nobody talks to the women about food, except me. This milk tasted like vanilla ice cream with an ineffable smoky flavor. It was absolutely incredible. And I have to say that in 30 years, I've only found it maybe one other time. But I got really focused on this because I realized that the literature was not describing this foodways accurately. The staple food of the Samburu was a smoke-cured fermented milk. And, you know, you have Levi Strauss, you know, the cooked, you know, the idea of the raw, you know, raw, the cooked and the raw, you know. And I think that anthropology has made the mistake of looking at this milk and seeing it as being raw. But, you know, prosciutto is raw. They don't drink raw milk. They're not animals. They don't eat like animals. They don't think of themselves like animals. And like all other human cultures, the Samburu see their food as one of the civilizing aspects of their human life. I had read this book, this segues to bread. I had been once up in the Alps in a village called Villard d'Arène. And in the gift shop, there was a book called the Pain Annulaire de Villard d'Arène, the bread that was baked annually in this village. And it was a bread that was baked once a year. Each family baked 1 ton of bread the last week of November. And they did that from 1790, when the village was founded, until 1960, when finally there was a bakery that delivered bread. Villard d'Arène was the highest elevation town in Europe that was inhabited 12 months of the year. And there was a Canadian anthropologist named, a French anthropologist named Marcel Maget. He was one of the founders of the Musée de l'Art Populaire in the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, for those of you who have been to it. And he was part of a group of anthropologists who, coming back from World War II, had this epiphany. They said, well, look, why don't we study our peasants in the same way that we study all of these people in Indonesia, in North Africa, etc. So he was told by a Canadian friend about this bread, and he sets out to document it. And he documents it from 1948 till 1960. Then he never comes back. It hurts their feelings. They thought he was a friend. And being a typical academic, he didn't publish his book until 1978. And when he published the book, it got into the village, and they said, wow, right, let's make this bread again. And they currently make it as a festival, you know, once a year. But he had enough detail in that book that you could recreate it exactly. So my project, starting in 1992, was to document this milk to such an extent that when they no longer were pastoralists, when they were in the diaspora, in London, in Nairobi, in Meru, in New York, wherever they would have moved, that they could get back to this food that was the central food of Samburu identity. A few years ago, some men, elders sitting in a manyatta in this little semi-nomadic encampment where I was doing some research, asked me, and they said, remember, Kenya was an English colony. English is an official language there. They said, they asked me this joke. They had a joke. They said, what is a Samburu who has moved to Nairobi? Anyone care to hazard a guess? What's a Samburu who's moved to Nairobi? A Kenyan. Because they don't have the milk. Okay, so I, with that preface, and then I'm going to also say, what you're going to see from here, is that I completed, so I started working sort of documenting the how-to, because the how-to was what Marcel Maget did. So I was very focused on the how-to, you know, what woods were used to make the wooden containers, what botanicals used to sterilize, clean the containers. It's semi-arid desert, so they don't have enough water to like clean their dairy equipment, so they sterilize it with burning sticks. And that was my focus. And then about 15 years ago, I read this book by an American anthropologist. And I guess because this is being recorded, it's fortunate that my aphasia for names is kicking in. And he actually wrote a book on Samburu food, John Holtzman. And in this book on Samburu food, he had many amazing claims. One claim is that they have no names for meal times. And the other amazing claim was that they have no culinary vocabulary. And I haven't looked at the book for ages, but I believe that's a direct quote. No culinary vocabulary. Well, I saw red, and I went back saying, I'm going to make a dictionary. So for the last 15 years or so, I've been going every year since 1992, sometimes twice a year. I have just been focused on writing a culinary dictionary of taste and texture terms in Northern Ma. It's been difficult. I can't pick up languages at all. I don't speak Ma, I don't speak Swahili. I cannot speak directly to the women who are making the milk. Women make the milk. But I use lots and lots of informants, lots of people. I've run through these words multiple times. And those of you who know my work with bread know that I have written a 60,000 word manuscript. That's being conservative. Actually, it's probably more like 80,000 word dictionary of culinary, of baking terms, bread terms in English, because culture is stored in words. I completed this dictionary this last trip. It's very emotional for me. I turned 70 on this trip. I had a birthday party with 500 people, 100 children and 400 adults. This is a place where I have more friends than I have in California. And they all came together. I cry easily and it might tear up a bit, but all these people came together to push me over the top to get this project finished. So what I'm going to share with you today is sort of a travelogue, get you a sense of where we're at and what the landscape is like. And I'm going to read to you some of these dictionary entries. And I have too many slides, so I'm just going to start a little bit and then maybe I'll read a little bit. We're going to be talking, though, about milking milk into wooden containers. And here is an example of one of these containers. There are 20 different shapes, and each shape is for a particular purpose, social purpose. Some are for boys, some are for girls, some are for women, some are for men. Some are for married men, some are for warriors, the young men who are responsible for communal defense. This particular one, which I'm assuming that the erect penis shape comes across quite clear. This is milk for the warriors. So only a warrior is allowed to drink out of this. You become a warrior when they establish the warrior group, which is a 15-year age set. And for the duration of your time within this age set, you can take milk at your mother's house, but you cannot get food from your mother's house. You cannot sleep at your mother's house. You cannot eat in front of women. You cannot eat alone. You can only eat with another Moran. That goes on. You can't marry. You can have sex, but you can't marry, and a whole bunch of other things. It's arduous. And you would get your milk out of this container. You're doing communal defense, protecting the herds. And so you could go into any house and this container will be sitting there for you with milk in it. That's no longer true because there's no longer any milk. And the little milk there was 4 years ago was either being consumed by the family in tea or it was being sold in the market. And they began to see taking milk as stealing. This is called a jongor. And the purpose of this one is to hold milk for blessings. And you will pour the milk into this container and like pour it on the ground, or in some ceremonies dip leaves into it while saying prayers. This one here, which is actually a gourd, which they get from the Turkana. This one is for the bride, the best man the best man to carry while as part of the marriage ceremony. And he's got milk in this, and the bride kneels in front of him, and he pours milk out here, and he gives this to her, and then she feeds him, and then another point she feeds her bridegroom, and she also performs some blessings. So that's very, very, very specialized. And if you smell this, you can't, very, very strong smoky flavor. I will now share my screen, and I will share my sound, and I will share here. And I will go on for a while, then I'll read some things. I'm open, of course, to questions at any time. So this is East Africa. And you can see, so just get yourselves focused, okay? So Kenya is below Ethiopia, Somalia next to Kenya, above Tanzania. The Masai Mara with the wildebeest migration, and the Maasai is on territory that straddles the border between Tanzania and Kenya. There is, actually they're not listing, it's weird, they don't list Sudan here, but South Sudan borders Kenya, and they have the largest refugee camp in the world with about 100,000 people. There's weapons that come in from Sudan, weapons that come in from Ethiopia, and weapons that come in from Somalia. The territory that I go to is only sort of under government control. When I first went there, it wasn't at all. Now it is under more control, but it is no longer safe due to the kind of walking that I did 20 years ago. Where you see here is the Samburu district. It's now a county, and you can see in the center it says Wamba, and that is basically where I do my work. And technically it's called the Samburu lowlands, because there's an escarpment and you can climb up to a highlands where the climate is quite different. You see the little road there. You see down Archer's Post at the very bottom. The way you would get here is through Archer's Post. There's a British military base there. And some years ago, those of you who read a lot of news will know that the British were raping the young boys who were taking care of the cows. And they now have a lower profile, used to see the military more often, but they do live fire stuff. They do their desert training in Archer's Post. When I first went there, that was a long drive to Archer's Post. Now we have these Chinese roads, and you can now get there all the way to Wamba in an Uber. Bye. Is I wanted to start with a prayer, because in this last stay, we ended every day with a prayer, with an elder reciting. So this is a picture circa 2000. The first big drought was in 1972. The next one was 1984, then 1986. But what you can see here is there's lots of cows, and the Samburu culture is based on cows. This is a milking Actually, that's the wrong one. That was a prayer, a prayer that women do when they are going into the mountains to pray under the traditional tree where they believe their god is, and there's some points in the moving to the tree where they're walking, singing that prayer and dipping grass into the milk and sprinkling it on the ground. There are no more cows. There have not been cows for 10 years. There's not a single cow. There is no grass on the ground. There is not a single blade of grass on the ground. This is what it looked like 20 years ago, this does not exist. This does not exist at all. All the cows are dead. What cows are not currently dead are about 250 kilometers away in disputed territory. In other words, it's not their tribal, not their territory. With the end of the cow culture, nobody drinks milk. It used to be that they drank milk. These people, I think you know, Northern Europeans. I'm not a Northern European actually, since I'm Jewish ancestry, but the complete Northern European ancestors are people with that ancestry. You can all drink milk. You are not lactose intolerant. Neither are these people. They can digest cow milk as an adult. This is again from the late 90s. This young man is a Moran, a warrior. Again, he's going to be like this for up to 15 years. And I asked him to pose with his favorite cow. There's no cows. There's no grass. There's none of that green stuff you see on the ground. The only thing on the ground that grows now are plants that are not eaten by goats or sheep. Right now, the only food for the goats and sheep that remain, and people are down to like 4 goats, 6 sheep. Some people have 12. Most people have none. The acacia have seeds, and what you do is every single day you go under the acacia tree, you shake the tree, and the seeds that are ripe that day fall to the ground. And that, I said April to October, I mean April to August. They're about to be finished. And once they're finished, there now is no longer anything for the sheep to eat. So people are either going to sell the sheep or let them die. And there's nothing for the goats to eat on the ground. But if you're near the forest, you can do illegal cutting of trees, the few that are remaining. And there's some riverbeds, dry riverbeds, where you can get forage. But the pastoralism has ended. I'll go back to this one. So it's rather emotional for me that I turned 70 and this big project come to an end, and you couldn't do it anymore. Starvation was beginning at the fringes of where I was. You did see people that were listless. There was a small UN event where they bought cows that were going to die within weeks and slaughtered them and gave the meat away. And there were people there that were just listless, sitting under trees. In the biblical story of Cain and Abel, the first two children of Adam and Eve, Cain is the first farmer, and Abel was his brother, and he was the first pastoralist. And of course, Cain murdered his brother and is famous for lying to his Lord. Hell if I know, am I my brother's keeper? These people are now actively trying to learn how to farm. I mean, they speak about farming. That's all that they can figure out. The food supplies that are being sent by the government are all stolen before they get there. So it's a wild place. You couldn't take this picture anymore, but this is what there's a man here who's asking about different ways of doing milk. So you've got to clean the container. And here is a little girl demonstrating. So. But she's taking the stick and they're putting it back in the fire. There's of course some embers that have broken. They're waiting for that stick to light again. And then they're going to repeat that until they repeat it until there's enough steam, because what they've done is they've used the milk in it, they've rinsed it, left about a tablespoon of water, and when that turns to steam, the lid's going to go poof, and then you're ready to then clean it out and then put milk into it again. The cleaning process is arduous, and it's a place where you separate the careful housewife from the uncareful housewife. And depending on how you actually wipe out the ash and ember, the ash and the soot buildup on the side of the wall will affect the flavor of the milk. The type of wood you use will affect the flavor of the milk and how long it can store. Now that when they had lots and lots of milk, you'd use a wood that would allow you to store for a week. And we're talking about fermenting. It's going to go through a fermentation cycle, which I'm going to get to. But you put the milk in here, and they don't drink it sooner than 4 hours. And that, even that is pretty young, because of course these are human beings, and we don't eat raw food like the animals. So after about 24 hours to 48 hours, you just get this incredibly nice, almost yogurt, not quite yogurt, almost kefir, not quite kefir drink, if the woman has made it well with a stick, kind of stick that you like. This is the land in 2010. And looking at it now, I'll tell you that it's quite amazing, because there is little tufts of grass down there. That's not what it looks like now. That's not what it looks like now. This is what it looks like now. And I'm sure you see it from a satellite, and I suspect it goes from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Sahel. This is the desertification. But it also is the confluence of two human cultures that were unable to say enough. I know all you guys, you're still driving your big cars, you're still living in your big houses, and you are using a massive amount of energy, and you can't stop. Me too. Some of you went to London. I've just been to Nairobi. I'm going to St. Louis in a couple of weeks. I'm going to Egypt in November. I cannot wean myself. So we have poisoned the air and altered the climate in the entire earth. And what they did is they overgrazed. We've been told, guys, you've got to stop. We say, well, maybe my daughter will stop. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I can't stop. I already own my big house. And they were told not to overgraze. They couldn't stop. So we really see, the intersection. We see the failure of life. And I have been telling people for decades that this place is the canary in the coal mine. And I'll tell you that it was very emotional and very disturbing and very difficult being there in July, because it didn't rain for 3 years and everything is dead. There is no topsoil, it's gravel. And at the same time I was there, of course, you've got the internet now, good cell connection. You see a picture of Lake Powell and Lake Mead at 20%, and you realize it's everywhere. It's everywhere the same. So it's scary. Now, in the year 2000, this was a grassy field with cows. I was staying about 50 feet from this erosion gully. And year by year, these gullies are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In this case, there's a layer of clay and it just liquefies. So I've recorded what you see is the elders. You see the mother of the blacksmith family that I was staying with, 4 wives, 21 children. And this is the mama who founded this empire. And you see the elders, the men standing up, they blessed us, and the women and children down below. And I had them singing a song, and I'm going to do a fundraiser so that they can begin to put in rocks to try to stop this. They've abandoned this land here. This actually belonged to the blacksmith family I stayed with, but no longer. I'm not going to show this one. This girl, when I came to bring her picture back, she was dead. It used to be every time I came back, I had a picture of someone who had died. She's holding, she was killed in a flash flood with the goats. And she's holding the container that is for the father, for the man. And it has cowrie shells on it. They note that the heart is surrounded by a white fat. They also identify the cowrie shell with the heart, and just as we do, with affection. So the wife has sewn these cowrie shells on the leather straps as a show of affection for her husband. So this is the old ways. This doesn't exist anymore. You could not take this picture any longer. I'm going to start moving into reading some words, but this is what sort of ethnographic research looks like, doing field research. Um, 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 God, sorry, aphasia for names. Anyway, my friend here, who I think just won a seat as an MP, he actually does have a degree in anthropology from the University of Nairobi. But this is actually working with Turkana women. But you know, you just interview people all the different ways you can. I guess the last little bit of the fun of ethnography, I went with this man, Maury, with 50 goats and sheep down to the singing wells. So there was no water in Wamba, and this is Maury. I stayed with him this last time. He's no longer a warrior. And styles used to change. You know, one year I go there, they all have white flags on their spears. There's no spears anymore because they have AK-47s. So, and they don't dress up much anymore because why would you dress up to take care of goats? Because goats are what kids take care of. This is a singing well. You can see the bottle of water, the bucket at the way down there, and there's a guy down there. He's pushing the bucket up to that man there, and they're singing. And each well has its AK-47. So this is our guy with his AK-47, and this is a mini disc recorder because I was recording them singing. Milk. This was everyday dress. And at this period of time, there were no flashlights, no artificial lights at all. So she's the girl who died in a flash flood, but just illuminated with the light there. And there I am, quite a bit younger, quite a bit younger. Let's see what I've got here. This was taken in 2016 or 2018, and that is this John Gore that I showed you, not the same one, but the little boy. And one thing I would do is ask people to take them out of their houses, and then I would take a photograph with a little label. And I've just done this over and over and over again, and then we write down what they're for. That's my daughter, Stella, when she was 9 years old, doing some research. There's some warriors. They are carved out of wood, and you do it with burning embers. So you can see it's black in there. They're putting these embers, blowing on it, and then with sort of metal gouges. These little houses are for goats, and this is a fairly old picture because there's actually cow dung as a roofing material. People are literate, so you have very wonderful buildings there. You know, wonderful signs. This is Edith, who's milking into one of the containers. But they're switching over to camels. There's my long-suffering daughter. And you're seeing the land, there's nothing there. The camels are related to giraffes, they can eat the acacia. So increasingly, it's camel milk. Part of my study, I'm studying the botanicals, but the names are all in Ma. So what I have to do is actually do botanical samples to find a botanist who then can tell me what is the scientific name for those terms. I collect containers from people and interview them before I take them. So there is an interview with this woman about this is called a soror, and that is for camel milk. Because there's no more, this is a current dwelling among the blacksmiths, and there's no dung. They just use scraps of this, that, and the other thing, and it looks pretty pathetic, which it is. There could be 6 people living in there. This is a warrior making tea, which is milk, sugar, and water. Okay. Any questions before I get into the dictionary itself? How much time do I have? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes? And
At least 5 minutes, but I think I can stay. I don't know about everybody else. I think 5 minutes or plus.
okay, let's go
I
for
have a question.
15 and I can just, yeah.
Okay. There was a girl cleaning the gourd in the video using burning sticks. How old is she?
I don't know. I'll say 6.
Okay. She looked young.
Well, they're malnourished.
Hmm.
Okay,
So I had a question, William.
yeah,
So when you go there, where do you stay?
I stay with them.
So you're staying in the blacksmith's hut then?
I used to stay in the huts when I was younger. It's very uncomfortable. There's a fire going all the time. So I sleep outside on the ground.
Okay.
And this time the blacksmith built us a nice little place, so we were kind of styling.
William,
So
there's a question in the chat from Josh that they use cow or camel milk, but not sheep or goat milk.
no, they use all the milks.
So whatever animal is available, that's
That's right. And now pretty much it is camel is the only milk
Okay.
they have any quantity at all.
okay.
And it's delicious. Delicious. Okay. So
Andrew, I have a question if you can hear me. Andrew, I have a question if you can hear me.
We can
Go
Robert
ahead.
Bauer. Okay. I read a paper today that said in Kenya, there are 4,721,000 camels. And in Samburu, in that county, there's 48,172 camels. Do those numbers sound right to you?
I have no idea. There's increasingly there's a lot of camels, and when you go further north as it gets more arid, there's more and more camels. Yeah. Okay. So the staple food of the Samburu is a beverage, and as you know, the wine people have this extended vocabulary that us non-wine people consider to be absolutely insane. And no, I cannot tell that there's blackberry, and I don't get the strawberry, and I don't get any of that. I've never trained myself in wine, but we're all familiar with the fact that in the wine, coffee, tea, whiskey world of tasters, there's a very, very, very esoteric and precise vocabulary of people who have trained their nose, who've trained their palate. So an educated one Samburu who'd been to Germany, when I asked, how do you drink milk? He said, well, it's like with whiskey. He said, you sniff first, and then you drink. So what's quite astonishing, and I'm going to go for 15 minutes if that's all right. Their vocabulary, their culinary vocabulary is way more developed than English or any European language that I'm aware of, and I suspect any language other than a pastoralist group that lives on, that has been prepared these ways. They have many words that we don't have. They have ideas that we don't have. One of our most complicated ideas is sweet and sour. They've got sweet and sour. They've got bitter and sweet. They've got bitter and sour. They've got sweet inside of sour. They've got bitter inside of sweet. They've got all just so many different ways of talking about mouthfeel and tastes and textures. So I'm going to read to you this definition, Quebec, and used to describe a thin mouthfeel or to milk diluted with water, the opposite of karucha. By nature, this is a relative term. Comparing milk textures, camel is the most Quebec, followed by cow, sheep, and goat. Milk texture changes seasonally. For example, cow milk, always less Quebec than camel milk, is seasonally perceived as Quebec when rainy season fodder naturally dilutes its texture. The strongest diluting effect is felt from the spring little rain that fosters strong growth of tender leaves and shrubs, rather than from the big rain in late autumn and early winter, which has a more immediate effect on the grasses. When new growth supports lots of milk, then the milk will be kebabek. Elders, which means men, monitored the condition of forage from their manyata homes, in part through changes in milk texture as plants adjust to the natural wet and dry cycles of the northern Kenyan interior climate. The first milk from the cow is kebabek, compared with the more karucha, thick milk that follows in 2 to 3 weeks. Goat milk is made more kebabek for 1 or 2 milkings when, after 1 week on the Lakis, the range, they are finally taken to water. The diluted milk of unscrupulous market women is kebabek. Chai, tea, milk, water, and sugar, that is more dilute, 1 to 4 parts milk to water, than the standard recipe 1 to 2 is kebabek. You can tell this by looking, as it's not dark. Ill people may ask for their tea kebabek, as may people who simply prefer it that way. As dilution increases, there are 2 further words, karadadai, which might be like 1 to 5 milk to water, and then when the milk or other nutritious ingredient, and this could apply to a meat stock, becomes an ingredient, as there is no taste whatsoever, you get to ulash. So what I've tried to do is capture all this information that is about to be lost, because none of the children are going to know anything about how seasonality and fodder interact, as there's no seasonality. There's no there's nothing there. So this is another long one, to give you another sense of the depth of this work. This is Kaida Kulan. It's a variant on the concept of Mishiamu, tasteless. So they have multiple words for tastelessness, multiple shades of tastelessness. And one thing I've tried to do in this dictionary is relate different words with each other, hoping that the native speakers will be able to piece it back together again. So Kaida Kulan is a variant on the concept of Mishiamu, tasteless. It applies to fluids that are relatively neutral in taste. Underpinning this tastelessness, as applied to milk, is the fact that manyata milk is always suffused with the complex tastes of fermentation fused with the taste and aroma of burnt botanicals used to sterilize the milking container. If we're used to milk suffused with the smoke of botanicals like laurian, sarachoy, luasaluk, nakik, etc., then milk without the deep and complex flavors and aromas of fermentation fused with burnt botanicals is Kaida Kulan by definition as being raw. So our milk is by definition Kaida Kulan. And when I was there, since they were only buying milk from the store, packaged milk, to make the tea, they made a very, very dilute tea because that milk is fundamentally tasteless, so there's no point in investing in it. Young boys far from water may sterilize their hands and cow udders with urine before milking. Moran drink milk fresh, as they do not sterilize the lamala with burning botanicals. This fresh milk may have a very slight smell of cow urine. Applied to milk, Kaida Kulan describes milk when it has a relatively flat taste. This description applies to milk stored in a lamala prepared for fresh milk that was prepared by rinsing in cow urine rather than burning sticks. So the Moran would do that. The warriors wouldn't do the burning stick. They might just rinse it with cow urine. The urine shortcut is used by Moran when they have milk producing cows, but too far from manyata to get the communal milk left out for them in each manyata hut. Urine is also used to clean wounds, as it's understood to be sterilizing. Now that climate change has compounded long-standing overgrazing issues, the degraded land in the Samburu lowlands, for example, example around Wamba, Langusaka, and Lucen Gap, no longer support herds of cows. The custom of providing milk for any Moran who enters a manyatta is dying out. A byproduct of the Moran's function as a defender of the local herds no longer being required, communal support for roaming Moran is waning. Today, Moran entering a manyatta hut, taking milk may be understood as stealing because milk is scarce and may have been collected to sell in village or town. Some manyatta houses no longer have a communal sleeping area where Moran can find rest among strangers, even in the middle of the night. Changes in the room arrangements, which I noticed for the first time on this trip, reinforced the changes in culture from the loss of the cows. The decline in the status of the Moran is also reflected in their dress. Moran caring for herds of goats, a much lower status animal than a cow, does not warrant fancy dress. Alkaline water fed to camels, although it may have an astringent or bitter component, is perceived as tasteless in the sense of kaidu-kulan. Fresh milk may also be kaidu-kulan. As an ingredient, cow's milk becomes more kaidu-kulan as the milk's mouthfeel becomes thinner, which happens as the milk becomes increasingly less fatty in the months following lactation. So one thing is that they could taste was the distance of the milk from lactation. So you begin with colostrum, which is very thick. Then you get a very thin milk as it turns white. It gets thicker and thicker, and then it again thins out. So people were able to taste that and appreciate it. Camel milk is perceived as kaidu-kulan by nature, and tea, lacking enough tea and sugar, thus lacking a rich taste, is also kaidu-kulan or tasteless. So that is, that one range of tasteless.
Excuse me, William, there's been a question. Do the botanicals used for sterilizing the containers discourage or enhance the fermentation of the milk? And does this vary depending on the botanicals being used?
The answer to that is yes, it does. The more bitter ones would keep the milk, as I recall, longer. And they used to go long distances. They would have to go to the mountains to get their really preferred one in groups of about 20 women because of the danger of buffalo and especially buffalo, which are very, very dangerous, but also elephants. But that no longer is the case. I mean, nobody cares anymore because they don't have much. There basically isn't any milk. But the answer to that is yes.
They do not milk the buffalo? They don't use buffalo milk?
No, these are wild buffalo. This is the most dangerous animal in Africa.
Oh,
This
okay.
animal will charge you until you're dead.
And
No, they don't.
Josh asked whether you said that the infusion of smoke and the fermentation happen in one step or not.
You're going to clean the container. You saw the girl doing it. You're then going to brush out the sides, which you can do with the cowtail, the preferred method. The best method, the next one is with the soft cloth, and the worst method is with a scrubby. They would actually take apart plastic bags and scrub it, and that would not taste good, and that would be a very lazy woman who people would not want to eat at her house. Yes, it's all in one step. They don't taste it as smoky, by the way. They will not agree that it has any kind of a smoke taste whatsoever, because they're seeing through to the underlying botanical. So to them, it's like saying, it's not smoky. It has, it's applewood. It's not smoky. It's hickory. It's not smoky. It's oak. But all we can taste is some smokiness. It's going through a step from this Kule Nairobi, which is fresh milk, Kule Nuato, which is just beginning to ferment, and then it turns into a yogurt, and finally it goes off and they throw it away. And did I answer the question?
Yes.
I can read one. Let's see. Coming here, not taste and texture. Well, here's just one other taste word that's short. Kaisukuta, mild sour, only applies to milk. We don't have this word in English, though many of us have experience of this milk state. It is milk that is at the point of becoming sour. It's on the cliff edge of sourness. We say the milk is turning, though appearing to still be emulsified. The milk curdles when boiled with tea. The next time your milk curdles when added to a cup of hot tea or coffee, you can explain with newfound precision to whomever is within earshot that the milk is kaisukata. It is said that adding salt to kaisuda milk prevents curdling in hot beverages, but it still cannot be boiled. The milk is naisukut on its way to becoming sour, naisukuta. Okay, a milk term. Let's see, Kule Nairobi. So the first stage is this Kule Naira, which is fresh milk, which means, some hours. Kule Nairobi is after the milk has turned cold. So again, when you go to Nairobi, it means cold in Ma. I'm going to read you the entry for Kule Naisukutan. This is the third of 6 different steps of fermentation within the container. As the milk shifts from Nairobi to Naisukutan, the second broad stage in the fermentation process, the taste shifts away from sweet, which would be the lactobacillus, towards sour, which is how you monitor the state of the milk in the lamala. While the milk does not yet taste sour, it immediately curdles and sours when boiled. As it now curdles in hot water, it's no longer good for tea. And remember, they're getting a lot of their calories from the sugar in that tea. So the tea is an important food. It's not pleasurable to drink as it doesn't have the sweetness of Kule Nerwa or the sourness of Kule Nwato. It's just in between, but it's good for porridge made with ugali, which is polenta. When you pour into the boiling porridge, you see the curds become stringy. The porridge is now sour, kaisicho. So it seems as soon as you add it to that heat, it quickly sours. If you have nothing else to have, use it for tea. You add the sugar to the milk, and then this to the boiled tea once it's off the fire, with a pinch of natron added, which is natron is an alkaline salt, and that stops it from becoming stringy in your tea. The milk behaves differently at this stage with sheep and camel. Their milks can still be used for tea.
William,
Yeah.
is this tea Camellia sinensis, or is it an
Yeah.
herbal tea of something?
They're big exporters of tea, especially to Pakistan, India, Iran, and then also to junk tea like Twinings. So they're big tea exporters, and they're big tea consumers. They don't drink coffee. For all practical purposes, it's impossible to get coffee in Kenya, outside of the big cities where they have a nice international type coffee shop called Java House. But otherwise, there is no coffee. So are there any questions? That gives you maybe an idea of what I've been up to with this. Any questions or comments or?
So, William, this may be off the subject, but I'd love to hear about your birthday party.
All right. And I guess one just a general statement is I believe that this applies to tortillas. I believe that it applies to Irish potatoes. I believe that this kind of analysis will work with a lot of poverty foods where the outsider doesn't bother to ask about subtlety, doesn't taste the subtlety, and doesn't engage with the culinary culture. So I think that what I'm doing here is a model for studying other cuisines of poverty, where all we're told is, yeah, the staple food is, flatbread, Okay, so yeah, it was kind of cool. I of course, my birthday was on the 29th, and I could have come home for my birthday, but the fact is there's nothing here for me socially. So we one a group that I've done research with donated a goat for the slaughter. We slaughtered 3 goats. And that was a really, really big thing and very moving because the woman only had 6 goats. And you know, that's like giving up 1/6 of your wealth. The animals is your money. If your child needs school fees, you sell a goat. If you have to go to the hospital, you sell a goat. You're down to 6 goats away. So we killed 3 goats, and Carol made a full video, an hour video of the simultaneous slaughter and processing of the goats. And then Augustine's wives, he has 4 wives, as I said, and sisters were cooking. And we had a lot of rice, potatoes, and there was some stew. There was they made chapati, they made a deep fried donut. There were lots of food. And what was very exciting for me was the first foods that came off from slaughtering the animals is the foot, the foreleg, the foot of the goat, which is cooked directly on the embers. So first it's burnt on the embers, then the burn is scraped, and what you're getting at is the tendon. And man, they were fanatic about that. And that is given to the women who do the cooking and young children. There also was this amazing intestine piece. So there's this big straight part that leads directly to the anus. So it's about this, it's about that long, okay, that long. And they just first push out the little, you know, goat feces balls, and then turn it inside out. Taking the outside, which has little pieces of fat on it, and that goes inside. And then that is baked directly on the embers, and it puffs up like a sausage and is one of the most fabulous foods I've ever eaten in my life. The party divided up. We had about 100 children, and my friend Kige, who was at the Oxford Symposium as a young chef, who the United States will not allow come to visit me. They did allow Elizabeth, the Indian woman who was also a young chef. They gave her a 10-year visa to visit me, but it's basically impossible for African men to come to America, regardless of how many times you've been to Europe and what prizes you have won internationally. So Kige, at a restaurant where I ended up cooking, I went to this restaurant to film making chapati for the talk I did, my bread history seminar talk I did live. And instead of showing me how to make chapati, they made me bake the chapati. So I was on the line for an hour and a half making chapati in this restaurant and making all the donuts. So Kige went to that restaurant and made cake. So we had cake, which they call keiki, is the name of a birthday cake. And we had enough pieces for 100 kids and adults. The elder men are separated. The men are separated from the women, and the men are just sitting under trees. And we bought 20 liters of Maritina, which is a honey wine. In this case, it's been fortified with some sugar and some other botanicals. So Augustine, my host, was very careful about how drunk people were allowed to get. So they're drinking, the elder men and the elder women, who were also under trees but separate. They were giving this Maritina, and then we also had a lot of beer. Things were rationed out. And then there's various bits of the animals that can only be eaten by certain groups of people. So the liver, for example, is divided up. There's a little flap on the liver that can only be eaten by married women. If there's no married woman around, you throw it away. The main part of the liver is eaten by men. The leg can only be eaten by married men, and if you're not officially married by the Samburu custom rules, which requires that you buy your wife with 8. Well, the price has gone down to 1 bull and 8 cows from 10 cows. Then you can't eat that part of meat, and again, you just feed it to the dogs if that person's not around. So there was some apportioning up of bits and pieces, but mostly people sat around and they sang and danced these jumping dances. The men jump, and the women are doing these dances. They have these beads that you saw around the neck, and they they can flip them. So there was music, and that's what it was like. Did that answer your question?
So there was no break. It just went for 3 days like that.
No, the birthday went for one day. It went from about 9 in the morning until about 8 or 9 at night. But he had to kick people out. I mean, most people had to leave. There are elephants. Well, one problem is that since there's nothing to eat, there's no forage anymore. All the elephants can eat is the same acacia pods that are being fed to the goats and sheep. So every night the elephants are coming in, encroaching on where the humans are encroaching on their territory. So there's a big need to get out of there before it's dark. And there also is a lot of insecurity. I mean, there's a lot of violence. So you don't want to have drunk people wandering around.
William, Josh has asked, how do the Samburu speak today about cow milk as compared to camel, sheep, or goat milk? And do they still have a vocabulary to make such comparisons in 2022?
Well, all the adults do, but the kids will not. The kids will never have had cow milk from a natural cow.
But do the elders still speak of the cow milk? Are they teaching the children of its existence or not?
You're in a society that's collapsed.
Okay.
And they don't have a tradition of, I don't know how you pass down the knowledge, because I would say pass down the knowledge because you don't have the milk, you don't have the botanicals, you don't. Basically, I either have it recorded or I don't.
Yeah.
Nobody else has recorded it for sure. So either, and I've got to read through these. I see I've did a lot of work on it there, and I've got some stuff that
even milk aside, do the elders teach the children of what came before? Is there concept of longevity? You're talking about things that even no longer exist?
I would doubt it.
Okay.
First of all, most people have moved out. I mean, the landscape is empty now. What I thought what the government had been doing for some years is they've been building dams to collect rainwater for the wild animals and for the cattle. And what I thought was going to happen is that you're going to get this economic development, the Chinese roads, people were going to start moving to the cities and towns, and the land was going to empty out, and the animals were going to walk out of the game reserves back into this landscape, and it was going to turn back into wildland. But that's not going to happen. It's just going to wash away. But most people have gone away. They've gone, as I said, about 250 kilometers towards Marsabit. You can look that up on Wikipedia. But the shit is only just about to hit the fan, because the acacia seeds are ending, like next week or two, and then people are either going to, the people who have sheep reproduce faster than goats, so they're a good kind of animal to have. But I was told there's nothing for them to eat. There's no forage. There's no tree they can cut for them. So they either are going to sell them at one of the markets, local markets. This meat is in high esteem in Nairobi because it's organic, has a very strong taste. You've just never tasted such good goat stew or such meat. It's stringy, unfortunately, because they're on the hoof. Only the Nairobians only buy the young animals, but the locals don't want a young animal; they want an old animal. So you're just stuck with this meat through your teeth. It's horrible. But the flavor is out of this world. You cannot buy a goat in Santa Cruz, California, and get anything like it. Did I answer that question? But I mean, you're looking at culture collapse, and I think you're looking at culture collapse here. It just is. When you look at Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and then you just go look at Phoenix, Los Angeles. Remember, those cities were built up with that, assuming that water was going to be there. And I think what you need to think of is that a deck of cards has been thrown in the air, and they're just beginning to fall to the ground. And as the starvation is just beginning in this area, but the culture is not salvageable because there's no topsoil.